this kind of small group of islands, the Orkney archipelago, and today the weather is nice. It's not always so pleasant, but yes, in a very special place here in the heart of Neolithic Orkney. And 5,000 years ago, this was a truly amazing site. Well, it's truly amazing today, but 5,000 years ago, when the site was at its height, there was probably no other site like it in the northern European and Atlantic seaboard. Well, I don't think people actually lived here, or at least in this kind of later stage. I think it was a place where people came together, congregated at particular times of year. But I would envisage, people from right the way across the Orkney archipelago coming here to the Ness of Brodgar at some time of their lives, almost like a pilgrimage site where they came to celebrate and mix, meet other communities, communicate with them, swap ideas. But it wasn't maybe just important for Orkney. I think the fame of the Ness of Brodgar might have gone way beyond the shores of Orkney. And just as we look upon Stonehenge nowadays in the south of Britain as this kind of focus for maybe not just southern Britain, but Britain as a whole in the prehistory, I think the Ness probably had that same type of status. The Ness is a very special site because every day we make new discoveries, and some of them are requiring the history books almost to be rewritten. We've discovered, the use of stone slates, probably the earliest use of stone slates anywhere. We've discovered pottery that was coloured. That again is a first for British prehistory, but also colour in the walls of some of these buildings. This year in some ways it's been relatively quiet. I think some of the finds that we've made, you find at any other site and it would make headlines. But here at the Ness, there's just so much beautiful material, new pieces of art coming to light each day, some wonderful polished stone artefacts. But I think the most important aspect this year has been that kind of overall narrative that we're building up, kind of clarifying the history of the site and how it developed. And one of the most important things we've discovered in one of our other trenches is perhaps an earlier Neolithic structure, which might give indications about why the Ness developed into this wonderful site. Well, we have evidence that the site was in use for probably well over 1,000 years. And sometimes in archaeological terms, when you say 1,000 years, you don't really consider that, but think about 1,000 years, the same time span in British history, between now and the Battle of Hastings. 1,000 years, and how society has changed and developed. And the Neolithic society was no different. It was a dynamic society. It was developing and changing, new ideas brought in. So I think, 1,000 years, how many generations does that represent? A lot. I would love a time machine. Well, I think they were all in use at the same time. They weren't all built at the same time, but there's considerable overlap between all these sites. So no doubt the people who went to the Ring of Brodgar and the Stones of Ness and Maeshowe also utilised the Ness of Brodgar. It was part of this huge complex of sites. Sometimes it's called a ritual landscape. And but the Ness seems to be kind of very much at the heart of this, the kind of focus for all these activities. And the Ring of Brodgar and the stones of Ness, which kind of so dominate our 21st century view of this landscape, were maybe only peripheral to what was happening at the Ness. The Ness was a very, very special place. Well, it's the scale of everything. Close by we have the Neolithic village of Skara Brae, where the houses are magnificently preserved. But they're relatively small. Here we have structures which are probably 3 or 4 times the size of them. And it's the scale, the complexity of the architecture. These aren't just buildings, these are pieces of architecture 5,000 years old. And we have, in our small trench here, relatively small, this still only covers about 10% of the site, 7 or 8 very large structures. But it's not only the structures, it's the fact that we're enclosed by a huge walled enclosure that really ran all the way around from behind us, along the shores of the lochs of Harry and Ness, and across on the other side of the site. We have archaeologists coming up here on a busman's holiday just because the archaeology is so wonderful. There's not many times in your life you get the chance to excavate such an amazing site. This year we're really trying to clarify the relationships between all the buildings to see how many of them were all in use at the same time. And the indications are that most of them, the ones that we've so far uncovered, because underneath these buildings, there's more buildings underneath and more buildings underneath those. But we're trying to get down onto the floor deposits and trying to work out exactly how these buildings function, what they were used for. There's lots and lots of different theories, but it's also the complexity that a lot of these buildings were probably in use for hundreds of years, and through that time they were altered, their function would have changed. And you sometimes see quite dramatic changes in them. Sometimes, obviously, they suffered from collapse and subsidence because they are sitting on top of these earlier buildings. So you see them being dismantled and rebuilt, buttresses added to the exterior. So a whole range of changes. So it's a big kind of jigsaw puzzle that we're gradually unpicking, but in 3 dimensions. It's really understanding what this site is all about, because I'm lucky I live and have worked in Orkney for many years, and particularly the Neolithic period, where we have all these wonderful upstanding monuments, and quite often people think we know a lot about them, but in many respects we don't. There's so much more to find out how all these buildings reflect changes in society that we see happening at other sites, how the whole of the Neolithic, why did the Neolithic develop in Orkney the way it did? Because we do have some of the best archaeology in Europe. We have some of the most iconic monuments, but to understand them all, to see how they all interacted yes, that's the most important part. And I wouldn't say the Ness is necessarily the key to it all, but I think it does hold quite a few answers.